Hey guys, Chicky Domain, Debut.com with a Debut.com forecast update. This forecast update effective around 2:15 Eastern Standard Time on Friday, October 13th, 2017. And been a little bit since we've done a video update. We've got a lot to talk about today. Hopefully you'll stay tuned in for the full broadcast. Start you off with newly tagged 92L Invest out here just east of the Northeast Caribbean. Earlier this morning you can see that there was some convection that was over the top of the spin that has since gotten blown off or faded away, and you can clearly see the rotational spin right in here working towards the Northeast Caribbean. The National Hurricane Center is showing a 30% chance of development next 5 days, moving off towards the northwest and then lifting off towards the north. Now, at this time, it does not look like that it's going to develop, and it does not appear that it's going to affect any landmass. It looks like that once it gets in here north of the Outer Banks, if it does develop, even if it does develop, move off towards the northeast and towards the North Atlantic. Now, I wanted to switch you back over to our post on October 9th. Is when we posted this to our website, Debut.com, and we talked about how sometimes, like in history, weather can repeat itself. And back on September 28th, we posted on our Twitter feed that the image of October 7th of Hurricane Matthew along the East Florida coast, and that back then the 12Z GFS model run for October 7th. Showing an area of low pressure developing off the South Florida coast. That in turn turned into Hurricane Nate, and so that on October 7th of 2016 we had Hurricane Matthew off the East Florida coast, and then on October 7th, 2017 we had Hurricane Nate going into the northern Gulf Coast. So showing you that sometimes in weather, like in history, it can repeat itself. So two hurricanes on the same date, 1 year apart, both affecting the United States. Now, ironically, at one point, the GFS was showing a hurricane for October 7th coming up the East Florida coast. That did not verify. But the other thing that we left out of that post that we wanted to kind of give you confirmation of what we say, and that is back in 2010, we had three named systems. We had Carl down in here in the Bay of Campeche. We had Igor out here in the northwest central Atlantic, and then we had Julia out here in the northern portion of the main development region. And then fast forward 7 years later to September 7th, 2017, although the dates were not exact, we had Katia over here in the Bay of Campeche. We had Irma in here just north of Hispaniola, and we had Jose out here in the north central main development region. So that's the JIK name storms in nearly the exact same positions 7 years apart. Maybe not to the day, but just once again showing you that sometimes, just like in history, weather can repeat itself. Now, we want to switch you over to some climatology for those who are unaware. We have now passed the statistical peak of the 2017 Atlantic tropical cyclone season. The statistical peak comes on September 10th, and so we're on the backside of the 2017 season, and it looks like it's coming quickly to a close. There is a shot that we may see one more coming in the third going into the fourth week of October. We're still looking into that, but this is also the time of year that we start to lose followers. And for those unaware, we're primarily a surf and marine forecast entity, but we'd like to tell people you don't have to be a surfer or a mariner to follow our forecast, because during hurricane season we consider ourselves a tropical weather expert. Now, as you can see, that going into the second and third week of October, we get a slight little spike in here, and then the season drops off dramatically in here, and then another little spike going into the first week of November before the season goes into non-existent as we get into December, January, and February until the season officially comes back around June 1st, which will be 2018. So for those followers that we're going to lose because all you're interested in is in tropical development, we hope to see you next year, or continue to follow us along until we get to next season. Now, one thing I will also point out is that although the season runs officially from June 1st to November 30th, we can and have seen tropical development in every month of the calendar year. So just because the season runs from June 1st to November 30th officially, it does not mean that we can't see development outside of those months. Now, switch you back over to October for tracks, and I'll zoom in here just a few moments. And if you had been following us along from the beginning of the season, you know, we talked about the old saying, another old saying, as it was in the beginning, as it shall be in the end. And in the beginning of the hurricane season, we always look for development in the beginning in the Western Caribbean, Gulf of Mexico, and off the southeast U.S. coast. And then as the season progresses into June and July, we start to look out here past the 65 line. And then once we get into August, it's the main development region. And then September brings on the Cape Verde, or end of August into the 1st of September brings on Cape Verde season. And that's tropical waves that are moving off Africa that can quickly develop and then traverse the Atlantic towards the United States. And then as we get past the statistical peak of September, we go back to the way it was in the beginning, and we watch for tropical development in the Western Caribbean, Gulf of Mexico, and off the southeast U.S. coast, or that 65 line that we talked about. Just like going back to the beginning of the season, we also look for the same patterns that we've talked about, which was that hook pattern or the round the corner pattern. Now, the round the corner pattern this time of year is a tropical wave that's moving off towards the west, and then the main axis spin can get in here off Costa Rica, start to spin up, move into the Gulf of Honduras, off the tip of the Yucatan Peninsula, and then up into the Gulf, which is like we saw with Nate, or like climatology tells us here, across South Florida, and then off towards the northeast. So we still have to keep an eye. There are a couple of tropical waves that are going to be moving this way, and then there may be, once the systems over in the West Pacific break up, it could release some energy to start traveling back across Africa, and in about another 7 to 10 days, we could see the last of the tropical waves of the 2017 season getting ready to cut across. The only thing that we'll be watching for now would be, we get into this time of year, just like in the beginning, homegrown development, and that is fronts that are moving into the Gulf of Mexico or off the southeast U.S. coast, because the rule of thumb there is always watch tail ends of fronts along stalled or dying fronts for an area of low pressure to develop. Once we get into November, you can see that development really drops off, and then track is typically down in here in the Western Caribbean, and then off with the natural flow. Cold fronts come in, sweep the area of low pressure off to the northeast as a fish storm. Switch you back now to some real-time satellite imagery, and give me a chance. I'll pull this over. Let me zoom in just a little bit. We'll start off with Ophelia over here in the northeast Atlantic in here. Ophelia is right in here. Ophelia forecast to move off towards the northeast, towards Portugal, and likely to affect Ireland in here in the next 4 to 5 days. And I'm going to switch gears on you in just a few moments, but we're going to talk about how the Atlantic Basin can oftentimes mirror the Pacific Basin, or if you want to switch that, Pacific Basin mirroring the Atlantic. But here is what was a hurricane force low yesterday, and then the front reaching all the way back to the Outer Banks in here. And again, the rule of thumb, always watch tail ends of fronts or along stalled or dying fronts for an area of low pressure to develop. This morning, if you were following us on our Twitter feed, you know we pointed out that there's a definitive spin right in here at the end of the front. And this looks like it's going to move up into here, get sucked up into this area of low pressure. Now I'm going to swing this back this way, and then we'll work our way back towards the Caribbean, because a large-scale pattern has developed, and this is going to be the next system that cuts across the United States. This is likely to dump some accumulative snowfall into southeast Canada as it moves this way, and it's this next front that's pushing through that's likely going to kick off a chain event. We'll show you that in the 12Z run of the GFS today when we switch over to the models, but watch this now, because this is what we're going to have to watch, because as this next front comes through, here's what it looks like as the forecast is setting up. We've got, give me one more second here, let me zoom back into this. We've got this area that's going to move north of Puerto Rico and up in here east of the Outer Banks. Again, this looks like this is going to get sucked up this way. We've got high pressure building in here, and this is going to roll out into the Atlantic, so that's going to pinch the front off. This is going to allow this to slide up north of Puerto Rico, and you can already see where it's trying to set up in here. It's already telegraphing. For those of you who've seen our Minority Report pre-crime division, you can already see, knowing flow, where the system is going to head, and it looks like it's going to lift up, just like the National Hurricane shows in their 5-day outlook in here. But what's more importantly is, as high pressure begins to build in here, all of this is going to start to ride around the ridge of the high pressure. And as this slides this way, it's what's going to produce down in here that when this front comes through, it's going to create draw from here. And the models have already been hinting, and we've been showing it in our social feeds, about a possible OBX low coming. So what we could be seeing in the upcoming, and we likely see development, or could see development, but going back to that, sometimes like in history, weather can repeat itself, an area of low pressure getting drawn up over Cuba, and then getting a chance to spin up here east of the Outer Banks coming up next weekend, setting up Wave Masters 2017 with possible surf alert conditions. So here's where we want to switch gears on you real quick. And when we talk about how these basins can act and repeat, this was a hurricane force low that was southeast of the tip of Greenland yesterday. This is yesterday's image, October 12th. And again, we've already talked about how the front extended all the way down in here to the Outer Banks. And then here yesterday is that area of spin that we now have 30% chance of development. That's 92L, right? So, but let's go back over to the Pacific. Because look, yesterday in the Pacific, Northwest Pacific, hurricane force low, the front extending all the way back down into here with an area of low pressure right in here. That would be like the Outer Banks, okay, and not in geographical terms, but as far as pattern on both basins, this would be like being the Outer Banks in here. There's another area of low pressure forecast to develop in here. That would be like the area moving north of Puerto Rico, and it's forecast to come in here and move up and then off to the right, just like that area that's moving north of Puerto Rico. So this is what we mean when we talk about how the basins can sometimes mirror each other. Now, we'll take it just a little bit further from here, because all of this energy, or what the models have been suggesting, is that as high pressure gets in here like this, same thing like we talked about and what we're getting ready to show you over on the 12Z GFS, all of this energy is going to be pumped up into the North Pacific here. And then after that, I'll have to swing it this way. After that, as it moves up into the North Pacific, again, here's this hurricane force low that was back over here yesterday. Now it starts to come back in, dropping back down into Canada and back to the U.S. So because it's revolving this way around the northern hemicycle. So as that happens, that's a key indication, because they're showing us such large systems up in here in the northern hemicap that winter season has arrived, and it's not going to be long. Winter swell season with hurricane force lows like this developing It won't be long till we get those big swells that come down in here to Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, and then down into South Florida as Clipper-like systems drop out of the Great Lakes region off the Outer Banks and then bombify into hurricane force lows in here just south of Nova Scotia and south of Newfoundland, putting in that strong northeast swell in the water. Now I'm going to switch you over to the 12Z GFS model run. This is this afternoon's model run, and we'll take a look at it, and I'll advance the model for you. At least let me set this up for you real quick. High pressure in here, that's going to move into the Atlantic. Here's Hurricane Ophelia here. Here's 92L Invest down in here. Here's this area of low pressure that's just north of the Great Lakes, and just out of your picture is that northwest Pacific low that's going to be dropping down in here towards the U.S. that will likely lead to some cumulative snowfall down in here into southeast Canada. We'll advance the model for you. You can see high pressure moving out in here to the Atlantic. Ophelia on her way to the northeast Atlantic, likely to affect Ireland in here with strong winds, gusty winds. 92L now. This is on Monday inside of 3 days. 92L moving north of Puerto Rico. And you can see as high pressure starts to build in here, high pressure clockwise rotation. Okay, look how this wraps around that ridge, and this is sending moisture out of the intertropical convergence zone all the way up in here to the North Atlantic. We'll move the model just a little bit more for you. And then this is likely the energy of 92L Invest now moving up into the North Atlantic. But look how this starts to draw on the Western Caribbean as I advance the model. This moves up, likely to develop into a storm. Let me move this up in here towards the North Atlantic. Okay, and then look here east of the Outer Banks. Now, this is going to be for October 19th. This is Thursday, inside of 6 days. So confidence starts to increase in the model run. So this is setting up the Wave Masters 2017. Strong east-northeast flow developing on Thursday. As area of low pressure starts to try to develop east of the Outer Banks, this goes into Friday. So we've got strong northeast winds and a decent northeast fetch in here aimed at northeast Florida. Advance the model some more for you. This goes into Saturday. Winds begin to relax a little bit for the contest. Hopefully it's not going to be big and choppy. But you've got a strong northeast gradient in here that builds. This goes into the Sunday, to the end of Sunday. We get a strong northeast fetch in here that builds. So it looks like we should have contestable contest waves for this year's contest. That's all we got for you for now. Stay tuned for the next update. Follow us on our social feeds for real-time updates. Thanks for following.